Good morning. Well, just to remind you, we decided to speak today in Spanish. If you prefer to hear the message today in English, then you need to wear headphones. And everybody who's using the headphones, you can explain to me later how your experience was. Thanks, Dave, for interpreting. And thanks, Ethan, who's out there on Zoom. Greetings to everybody who's out there on Zoom. We're in a series that's called Loving Well in the Seasons of Life. But for 2 weeks we've been talking about marriage. But somebody told me I wasn't so interested in the marriage part because I'm not married. But in that moment we were saying, hey, everybody needs to understand something about the challenges and the commitments of the married people. So we can help each other. So we can understand married couples. And the same thing, thanks Edison. The same thing I want to say about speaking about being single. Not everybody's single. I'm not single. But we all need to understand something about the topic, and so we know how to help and encourage the people who are in this stage. In all the different stages of life, we all need each other. So, one of the primary life goals for every person, and certainly every Christian, should be to learn to love each other well. To love someone well requires some work, learning and unlearning. But many people think about love in terms of having a partner, a spouse. It's interesting, however, to think of children. Generally, the children are not married. But sometimes it seems like they can love more easily than the adults. Maybe that's why Jesus told his disciples, truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. A loving marriage is a good thing. The Bible encourages marriage. The Bible presents a loving marriage as a metaphor for starting to catch a glimpse of the love of God, permanent, passionate, present. However, the same Bible teaches that to be single, not married, is also a good option. In fact, Jesus himself, the most inspired and inspiring person in all of human history, he was never married. Jesus was fully fulfilled, purposeful, integrated, and completely happy, connected, and single for all of his life. To talk about being single, I need to state the obvious. I married Lisa when I was 23 years old. We're still together, happy, and now I'm 55. I was single for a time. But since that time, the pressures, the expectations, and the challenges for a single person have changed. You might be single by choice, but maybe not. You might be young and single, or single and older. You might be looking for someone to share your life, but you may not. Life imposes a lot of circumstances that we don't choose. We have to accept them, adapt, adjust. Circumstances can be very cruel, but also very kind, very good. In the midst of the cruelty and the suffering, the loneliness, the uncertainty, life is full of surprises. People surprise us. Love can appear like magic. Situations can change suddenly. We never know what tomorrow will bring. The next day, we never know what's coming. You and I cannot control our circumstances. So, what are we supposed to do? Well, we focus on what we can control. We can choose our attitude, our effort, our goals, and our friends. When I was young and single, I chose to focus my attitude and effort on becoming a certain kind of person. As a single person, I identified my ambition and I began to pursue friendships and learning opportunities that would help me to move in the direction that I wanted to go. I read and I studied. I participated in service projects and mission teams. I went to conferences. I worked hard to find friends who would encourage me to do my very best and to be myself. I truly believe that every single person should and can have some clear life ambitions. And every person should be focused on pursuing learning opportunities and finding friends who will encourage and believe in you. Believe in you. Where many single and married people struggle is in the area of spiritual growth and development. We underestimate the importance of a strong heart, personal convictions, and meaningful spiritual connections to God and with the community. Many people ignore their spiritual development. This is a mistake. The scripture says in 1 Timothy 4:8, physical training has some value, but spiritual growth has value for all things, holding promise for both the present and the life to come. I read and studied my Bible so that I could learn spiritual wisdom. I tried to understand the connections between my choices, my circumstances, and the confusing array of ideas, my ideas, dreams, girls, jobs, careers, travel, and so many different ways to spend money. Life is like an orchard, like a garden. The attitudes, the activities, and the friends you choose are the seeds or the weeds that eventually will show the world the truth of your life. All of us are born like as a miracle, ready to grow, laugh, and love, just like children. But somewhere in the early years, we begin to lose the laughter and the love. We are hurt by others, and we hurt them. We learn about power through misuse and abuse. We misunderstand because the things aren't explained well for us. We develop habits and skills that can help us and hurt us. Sometimes we can't tell the difference, and sometimes we don't even care. If you've had some bad relationships, some bad interpersonal relationships, it's important to learn how to be able to see the truth about your part of the problem and to know what changes you are making in your life so that you don't fall into the same patterns for a long time for the same reasons. I truly believe that every single person should be creating extra time to read and study the Bible within the context of a community. The community that will encourage and believe in God's guidance for your life. In our small groups, we're studying Philippians. There'll be a group in person Monday, tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. So if you're not in another group and you want to come tomorrow at 10 a.m., Lisa will be starting a new group. Well, we're studying Philippians. It's a letter that Paul wrote to be circulated among all the Christian communities in the region, starting in the city of Philippi. It's been about 30 years since the resurrection of Jesus, but I want to go back to a time much earlier. About 15 years earlier, before the letter of Philippians, when Paul wrote a letter that we call Galatians. It was circulated around the region in around 40 AD, in the Common Era. Sorry, it was the first letter. It was the first letter published and circulated of all the letters that we have as our New Testament. So it's the first one that's written and circulated among the Christians. Was Paul's letter to the Galatians. That makes it extra interesting for me. Galatians is full of metaphors and illustrations. They're especially interesting if you're familiar with Genesis and Exodus. Paul contrasts faith with fear, working hard to earn God's approval, in contrast with accepting his love and forgiveness as a gift called grace. Paul says that we can live like slaves to our fears and to our struggle to be good. Or we can begin to believe that God's love is a gift to receive if we're willing to trust and obey. Galatians is all about freedom and transformation. I'm still fascinated by reading Galatians. Paul says that Jesus does not lead by using authority, hierarchy, or choosing favorites. When we're with Jesus, we're in a safe circle where not only men and women are equal, but also servants and masters, slaves and free, Jews and Greeks. Paul is just saying, those are basically, they divide everyone in those two groups in that time, in that culture. Basically, Paul understands that Christianity is the opposite of using racism, prejudice, pride, and power, anger, or fear to move and motivate people. Paul says in Galatians that all these kinds of attitudes are the marks of people living in slavery. Why am I talking about this in the topic of the singles, but also because this is also for married people. And this is our human nature that causes us to live in these ways with these reactions. So Paul says the good news of the gospel is that we can be free. We can experience our lives as children of the living God. Galatians 5:1 says, it's for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then. And don't let yourself be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. You've heard me talk about you have to look back in order to move forward. Paul's saying that. We get stuck and trapped in our past. The pressure, the culture, the traditions, the things in our mind. But Christ makes us free. It takes work, but Christ sets us free. What do you need to be free from in your life? Well, Paul makes a list, a great list. reminding his listeners what they already know about the dark side of their insides, their human nature. He writes in Galatians 5:19, "The acts of the flesh are obvious: sexual immorality, impurity, debauchery, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissensions, factions, and envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. I warn you, says Paul, as I did before, that those who live like this will not inherit the kingdom of God." Hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, etc. These are topics for adults, not for little children. Remember, Jesus said, you have to become like children. These are things that they're evident to the owners, but often we have these things hidden in our hearts. The fact that someone can hide their anger or their capacity for creating discord doesn't make them a better person. These attitudes will poison our souls. They're like the creeper vines that we get used to in the garden of life. But they're choking out all the good plants. If you hope to have a loving marriage, a marriage or a friendship or a relationship of a life, you need to get rid of your anger, your jealousy, your selfishness, your drunkenness, all of this. The question is, how? It's notable that four things in this list have to do with our sexuality. We need freedom in this area too, my friends. Rich Viotas is a pastor in Queens, New York. I've met him, we're friends online, and I've learned some really helpful insights from listening to him and read what he writes. In his first book called The Deeply Formed Life, he wrote several chapters on the topic of spirituality and sexuality. I really recommend it. Sexuality and spirituality are very interconnected. However, our thinking, our way of thinking, our understanding about both sexuality and spirituality is often very deformed in unhelpful and subtle ways. Both involve sexuality and spirituality, both involve a deep sense of longing for connection, a profound desire to know and be known, to see and be seen in all the areas of our life. Viotas writes, "The sexual desires we possess, when they're ordered correctly, bring us to union with God and communion with each other. The love of God doesn't remove our desires, it reorders them." When you are single, you have the best opportunity and time to develop your connection to God and to others. Again, the question, how? Well, I started by noticing and naming all my bad habits from the list. I began in my life noticing, naming, and all these bad habits. I asked God and my friends to help me see my own selfish and stupid behaviors. The life as a Christian invites us to transformation. Transformation requires help from outside ourselves. A single person who is healthy is not alone, isolated, but is connected to a community or family who's helping them to who's helping them learn to understand themselves better and grow. In fact, that's the case for every person. A person can be married and isolated, right? Living alone. We can be isolated, just having conversations and ideas in our own head, talking to ourselves. That leads us to mental sickness, but it's the way many people live. And we've got to bring things out, bring it out into the light, be transparent, talk to other people. Married people and single people need to integrate our worlds. We need each other. We all have growing to do. Use what you are learning to serve and encourage others. Okay, singles. I have a few questions. One question. If you're married, all these questions are for you too. The question for singles, if in case you want to be married to someone in the future, what kind of person would you like to be with? Okay, I understand that. Some people are saying, no, I don't know if the best is to get married. I don't ever want to get married, or I don't want to return to be married. I'm not interested in that. Okay. But if you're thinking, I would one day like to be married, be accompanied by someone, what kind of person would you like to be with? And are you ready to be that kind of person for them? A good question. So I wrote down some questions, probably projecting from my own youth, some of my own difficulties. But here's some questions, and maybe something applies to you. Do you know how to clean up your own mess? You left a mess, and so reorganize it and clean it up. Do you know how to cook a menu for the week? Okay, this week? No, just for a day. Okay, not for the day, but just for one meal. Just one meal. Lisa invited me to make a meal, and she says, yeah, where's the salad? And I'm like, salad? We ate salad a couple days ago. She says, no, John, come on. You need a menu for the whole day. I've had to adapt. Do you know how to manage your money, to eliminate debt and still have something to give, something to grow, and something left over for emergencies? Can you agree to disagree without anger, insults, or periods of punishing silence? Can you listen without giving advice? That's hard for me. I hear something and I want to just start providing advice according to my perspective. But a man married to a woman, in my case, Lisa tells me, I just want you to listen to me. I don't need all this advice. I just want you to listen. Can you learn to love what the other person loves, even if you don't get anything in return? Another example. Lisa wanted to have a Great Dane, so we have Fiona. Fiona, I could take her out to walk every day. When she was a puppy, twice a day. I didn't like that. I didn't want to. But I had to learn to love to go out and walk with Fiona and Lisa and enjoy this time. Now I enjoy it. Yeah, Fiona's 9 years old now. It's not simple, but these are the challenges for all of us, singles, married. So what steps are you taking to make progress? Who's helping you? Do you make excuses to explain or justify what you do? Or do you take the responsibility to change? Well, in Galatians, Paul is telling us that God has provided a new way of being human. Life, by faith in Christ, changes everything from the inside out. This is transformation. Many of the changes that I was talking about maybe are just small adjustments in our attitude. But the changes that come from our anger, our jealousy, the list that we read, that requires transformation in our heart. Galatians 5:22 and 23 says, But the fruit of the Spirit, this is the contrast with the list that we read, the fruit of the Spirit, the evidence of the presence of God, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. In life, that's like a garden. These can be the fruits, the flowers that are growing in our life. And with time, as time goes on, in greater abundance. We were created for more than we know. Find someone who's loving, joyful, patient, and ask them. They may not be able to explain it. Ask them, how did they learn to be that loving, joyful? Go to a happy person, say, how did you learn to be always happy? How have you been able to always answer this person calmly and with patience? How is it possible that you're there listening and listening and listening to that person? Ask them. Maybe that person can't explain how they learned, but their good attitude will be contagious. You eventually will become like the people you spend time with. Your friends are going to influence in the type of person you're going to become. So, open your eyes, pay attention, and choose carefully. When Paul writes about the acts of the sinful nature, the list that we read, Paul is writing from his own life experience as a single man who once wanted to be married. Perhaps he even was married. We don't have all that information, but there's several theories. But when he's writing, he's a single man. He's looking at all the different things of life, and many of the problems that he's sharing, these were his problems. And he is telling you and me, God's love is real. And when you can start to connect with God's love for you, everything else will start to flow. So the priority to organize your life is not to figure out how am I going to earn money. Money comes and goes. With whom am I going to be? A friend or a spouse or a partner? Yeah, but the friends change. Life changes. But the key is to get connected to the source of life, which is the love that God has for you. You can become like a child in areas that give life, that are life-giving. Act like a child with your anger is something else. But to act like a child with happiness and joy and have the ability to see people with love. Your life is like a garden. You've got some good seeds and some bad weeds. When you find a weed, a bad weed, try to pull it out by the roots. Don't hide it, pull it out. Take care of the good seeds so they can grow. And in time, your life will produce the fruit of the presence of the Spirit of God, which, like fruit, needs time to grow, mature, and produce a harvest of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, humility, self-control. If you want to live this transformation, then what is it that you need to be liberated from? What is your next step?